This is Reality with Perciality. I am your host, Percy A. Lewis, together with my co-host
Ivan Williams, good morning.
Good
and
morning.
and our colleague who has joined us, partnering with us now on the set, Dr. McFadzean, Yvonne McFadzean. Hello.
Good morning. Good morning, Percy. Good morning, Ivan. How are you guys doing?
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Michael.
Much obliged. Human beings comprise a physical nature that includes the body and mind, and we are spirit beings at the core. For we only became life when God breathed life into us. 2 weeks ago, you, Dr. McFadzean, was on this show, Reality with Perciality, where you made a presentation about your journey, past, present, and future, in becoming the best version of yourself. During the interview, when asked about your qualifications, you made the clear distinction between what is universally referred to as a degree as opposed to a credential. You also exposed most people's naivete when making references to people with disability because most people fail to specify the disability, i.e., not all students are challenged with autism.
Yes.
You revealed from your training that disability has 13 categories. The subject you will flesh out for us and our audience today. You are taking ownership of a new series on Reality with Perciality under Humanity's Holistic Wellbeing and Spirituality, covering body, mind, and spirit. Your series, beginning today, addressing mental health. When you, Dr. McFadzean, sojourned to the United States, you were already a trained teacher from the Belize Teachers College.
Yes.
When you began your teaching career, you were not deliberate about going into the field of special ed.
Mm-mm.
Our world in Belize, where wherein Belize has limited understanding. You, Dr. McFadzean, hold a bachelor degrees in school psychology, a master's in reading and language arts, and your PhD in special ed. Having done qualitative research in this field, namely inclusive practices within Belize, with the help of 30 educators and administrators in the system, teaching profession, with whom you conducted interviews. Um, in the U.S., a teacher is often limited if he/she only has the degree, but not the teaching credential to go along. In the first place, to teach, one has to have a teaching credential. Then, whoever may have a degree and aspires to teach primary school, i.e., ought to get a primary credential to go along. If he/she is applying to teach secondary school, he/she must have the requisite degree, and together with that, he/she also needs to have a secondary credential to go along in the particular subject
Yes.
he/she aspires to teach. So, Dr. McFadzean, you hold a multiple subject credential, which enabled you to teach at any elementary school in the US, a K-12 credential, which enables you to teach at any high school. You later retired from the post of Director of Special Ed, after which you went on to obtaining a special ed credential. In addition, you have a resource credential and an administrative credential, which one needs to become an administrator within the U.S. public school system. So the Lord has brought together ourselves, a team of consultants, my host, co-host, consultant in labor law, former labor commissioner, you, my cousin Yvonne, consultant in the field of special health. As well, you have a charity. Soon to come on stream, hopefully, our consultant, we won't call his name yet because we haven't come to terms, consultant in the field of physical health. But to give you a hint, you know, he's been on our show as late as yesterday. Together with myself, our spiritual scientist, who is the architect of the program, therefore able to withstand all the criticism. Now, Dr. McFadzean, please go ahead and make your presentation. The first in a series having to do with special help.
Special education.
Special education. Thank
Yes.
you. Mental health. Sorry.
Yeah. So, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here again because this is my passion. My new passion is to make sure that the people of Belize, specifically people from Dangriga and Punta Gorda, wrap their heads around and have a full understanding of what this monster called special education is. It's easier to understand than we think. And I just need to correct one thing there, Percy. You need all those credentials before you get that position, because you said after which in one of those areas, but you can't get that position without the credential.
Okay.
So one of the things I want to tell our listening audience, this whole idea of learning, right? So we're in the physical being now. We're here on this planet. We have to try to decipher and learn different things. That's why something called school was created, so we could increase our knowledge, even though, as my father would say, there's a difference between school learning and true education, because not all education happens within the four walls of a classroom.
Yes.
We also owe it to ourselves to seek knowledge, which is why I like this platform, because you're trying to educate, Percy, your audience in the whole thing of spirituality and humanity, which is good. My narrow contribution to this bigger cause that you're on is understanding the learning process that goes on in the classroom, because that's what we as teachers and educators should do, because we're interacting with students and we're trying to partake knowledge to those kids in a matter of subject areas. As an elementary school teacher, you teach all subjects, so you have to have a knowledge of reading, writing, math, social studies, and all those things. But more importantly than knowledge is, how do I make sure that I impart this piece of knowledge for the kids to understand and own that knowledge? Because teaching is not for the teacher. It's for the students to own the knowledge. And so that's where the task of a teacher is. But in there, then we find out that students have unique strengths, talents, interests, and ways of learning. And so that's where our craft, our teaching craft then becomes, there's a science to teaching and there's an art to teaching. And so we owe ourselves then to seek the ways to turn our science of teaching into the art of teaching. So every child that comes into that classroom in front of us leave with the fullest potential that they come to us with, and then we build on it. That's why we have grade levels. One of the challenge I had was also who determined what each grade level should learn, but that's for a different audience. And that's why here in the States, a lot of parents have gone into home teaching, so they could have control over that body of knowledge.
Yes.
However, many students are participating in what we call general education. And that's what we knew for a long time in Belize. You'll go into infant one, everybody there together. There are things that teachers do determine whether you've passed that grade or not, and then you go into infant two the following year. So you're promoted based on a body of knowledge that teachers determine, whether you've grasped it enough to move on to the next grade level. And so that's what pretty much general education was. However, throughout the process, students are learning so differently. There's a group of kids that for whatever reason, I'm not reaching. And sometimes the teacher, if it's a true teacher, because let me say, some people are in the classroom just to make money. They don't make a difference in those children's lives. And so you find out, okay, some of these kids are just not learning no matter how hard I'm trying and I'm using the techniques. Hence the
Yes.
credential program, Percy, because you should learn the techniques of teaching in those credential programs. So then, the thing called special education came along. Okay,
Okay.
here in
Okay.
the States, it was a group of parents who advocated for those kids who just weren't doing well. They didn't think that they were being served. And okay, they formalized it to where now we have 13 eligibility criteria
Uh-huh.
in the States.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Now, it takes a trained school psychologist with a body of other experts to sit around a table to after assessment to determine eligibility.
Uh-huh.
No one person can look at a child and say, "Oh, you have autism," and beliefs tend to do that.
Okay.
It's more precise than that. So you need a trained school psychologist who administer a body of tests, mostly cognitive tests, to make and then write a report, and then general education teachers, special education teachers, administrators, parents sit around a table, discuss the finding before they determine whether this child fully is really have one of those eligibility. In the interest of time, I'll just get right into what those are. Let's talk about number one, autism spectrum disorder, ASD. It
Okay.
it's called spectrum, Percy, because no two children with autism are exactly alike. So children with autism may experience differences in communication, social interaction, and behavior. Some may have difficulty understanding social cues. So you could see a kid with autism who, you could tell them, sit down, or you give them, maybe eye contact, or give them, that goes right over their head. They don't get it. So you have to find other ways to communicate with that child. Okay. Um, Others may have intense interests or prefer routines. My first child with autism that I met at an elementary school is because the parents did not want this child in a special ed classroom. They wanted this child in a regular classroom. And I happened to be the teacher that was chosen to teach this student. That was when I started my journey on what is autism. And it took years to fully understand it, because my perception was this one child and what I saw with him. These are the children. If you've seen the movie Rain Man, tell our family, look at that
Okay.
movie Rain Man. Those are
Okay.
some of the behaviors. They have repetitive behaviors. They can kind of, I describe it as a train going in one direction but doesn't know how to turn back. So once
Okay.
their mind
Okay.
is on a certain things, they're locked on it. And again, that's only one group of kids. They have
Yeah.
students who are nonverbal, and so they need speech therapy, okay, to help them communicate.
Okay.
One adult with autism describe it as they feel like their their real self is tied up in their body, and they have no control over it. So autism is a spectrum because it varies from one person to another. Okay, so
Ah,
and that's why it's more difficult to understand.
yes.
Yeah, the other category is deaf and blindness. Well, that's easy to understand. It's a combination of somebody who's deaf and who's blind, hearing and vision loss that is significantly affects learning. And again, all this is compared to how that child learned. If you can't see the material, and even with glasses, and a lot of our kids who need glasses can't even get it. And I know that there are a lot of nonprofits who bring glasses to Belize. That's why a lot of our students who are deaf and probably need hearing aid, that's not easy to find in Belize either. So if a
Yes.
child is in your classroom and you put that child sitting in the back, the class noisy, the student is already deaf, Can learning take place? No. So what I want our audience to do as I talk about these things is, if I had those problems, what support would I need to access that curriculum and then participate in the learning process? So for some kids with the deaf and blindness, they might need glasses, they might need hearing aid, they might need cochlear implant, especially for the kids who are born deaf. And I've had that experience with a nephew of mine.
Yvonne,
Yes.
why this thing not say deaf and or blindness? If you are deaf, does it mean you also have to be blind?
No, some kids have it though. So it's one of those. So deaf
Okay.
and blind, deaf and
Okay.
blind. Now,
Okay.
deafness, another one is deafness by itself,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Because
Okay.
you can
Yeah.
be deaf, severely have severe
Gotcha.
hearing loss. So that's
Okay.
a category by itself. So these are
Gotcha.
categories,
Respect.
groups like that.
Respect.
This is
Okay.
how they divide it.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
and
Gotcha.
remember, these kids can achieve excellent academic outcomes if they have the appropriate support. That's why
Uh-huh.
special education exists. It
Okay.
exists simply to say, what support do these kids have so that they
Mm.
can maximize and participate in the learning process. A
Yes.
lot
Yes.
of
Yes.
time we've excluded kids from learning because the support is not there. So it
Mm.
behooves us, it's important that as educators, we dig deep when a student is not learning. It's, first of all, look at your teaching style. Is it you as a teacher? Because sometimes it's a teacher, and not every teacher knows how to teach and depart that
You ain't
knowledge.
lying.
And so if it's not you,
Mm.
then let's look at other factors. But
Yeah.
again, it should not be a one person decision. Okay.
Gotcha.
There's a
Gotcha.
process that you have to go through to determine one of these eligibilities. And the reason why that's important, Percy, is we run into the problem of over identification. Because the minute a child isn't doing well in the classroom, it's easy for somebody to say, oh, she must be special education. And labeling students is not good
Okay.
either, because with labeling comes some limitation depending on who that professional is in front of the classroom. It kind of
Yes.
it will
Yes.
kind of make you feel like, okay, it's not me and there's nothing more I can do, and then you point, the problem
Mm.
becomes the child who really
Mm.
isn't the child.
Mm.
Any questions, Percy?
No, it's hard to have a question because you were so clear. But
I had a question though.
I'm glad that you distinguish two categories. Deaf and blind, deafness and blindness is a category,
Mhm.
and then deafness is a different category, separate and apart from. Go ahead, Coles.
No, I wanted to ask Doc, what training do you need to have to be a school psychologist? Because and how do we fit in beliefs or in terms of our
Okay.
needs?
Like I said, remember all the credential and licensing. So to become a school psychologist, that's a totally different license. It might take me 3 years to become a school psychologist. And we don't have any, well, if there's one or two school psychologists in Belize, it's a lot. It's usually when people come from the States with those degrees already and those licensing that help with those identification process. And we're having more and more nonprofits or universities that are coming in to do those work. But that's an area of need in Belize. More school psychologists. We're not
Okay.
there yet. And that's why the identification process in Belize is also different. Because when I did my research, one of the term we would use is identified disability. And I was told, well, we can't really say that because they're not identified appropriately by a school psychologist. But what they do is they give them some academic assessment, and then um, it looks like a student with autism. It looks like. So that's
Okay.
as far as we are in
Okay.
Belize at this point. Now,
Okay.
luckily, there are parents who have families in the States, and if they're really, really concerned, they come out here and then they go through those series of tests, and then those students then are really identified. Or when the school psychologists or doctors come to Belize and they do assessment to determine one of these eligibility, then you can say that a student is fully identified. Prior
Okay.
to that, it's not a true identification. But
Okay.
that's not to say that we're not moving in the right direction in Belize. Special education is very costly, even here in the States. As a special educator at the school site, because when I was an assistant principal at the high school, one of my duties was to supervise the special ed department. And even when I moved to the school district as a coordinator first of special ed and as a director, we often had meetings with the business department to look at cost, because then it affect the overall budget, right? It's
Okay.
very expensive. And for my research, one of my finding was we always have to have a plan, whether it's a 5-year or a 10-year plan. What is the fiscal plan of Belize, of special ed department, of
Okay.
the Ministry of Education, as we unveil certain aspects of special education, so we can get to the point where we're beginning to service those students more appropriately.
Okay. Before we move on to the next four or so categories, um, you said you to become a psychiatrist would need 3 years or so.
Or
I
so,
just
yeah,
wanted, I
we
just
could.
wanted, I just wanted to be clear that in addition to what you already, the qualification you already have to get that special qualification of psychiatrist, yes?
Yes, and that's the
Okay.
thing, Percy.
Okay. No, no, I
Okay,
didn't know. I mean, I just wanted to clarify so you could go on to the next four.
no, I like that question because uh, Ivan, Google how long does it take? Google that for me so you could see what it takes to become a school psychologist. Perceive, and that's the thing, that one
Madani
body of
tuwacha, madani
one.
tuwacha lusum tukatele.
Wait, I will look while I talk though. Let me tell you something, Percy.
Ah,
One qualification doesn't make you an expert in the other. And that's why even with special education, you might find out that they have because there's something called related services for these kids, right? So you might have an occupational therapy, you might have a physical therapist based on the need of that child. Even though I have a doctorate in inclusive practices, I do not have the techniques that an occupational therapy would have for the student who needs that. I don't have the techniques as a physical therapist for the child who needs that. I don't have the we also hire people who work with specifically with for hearing aid. Like those people would make sure the kid have the right hearing aid, that the hearing aid is functioning, that they teach the student how to use this hearing aid. Give it, yeah, give it. So you could
okay.
see why the cost is there, right?
Yes, yes.
So part of what Belize still need to do, and we're far from that, Percy, is specializing in all these different areas, and having a license or a specialty in one area doesn't make you a specialty in all. So that would be my caution.
Okay. But you see, I don't want this to cause us to veneer too much up. But I have to comment and say to you, right, that a problem that a lot of parents have. This is my opinion,
Mhm,
strong opinion, but it is just an opinion, right?
mhm,
Is that they want their children in class A as opposed to B, as opposed to C. They want, so while it did good for you as an individual to delve into this topic of special ed because this parent wanted this special ed child to be in a regular classroom, right? It did good for you as an individual, right? It made you specialize. But my opinion is, it's not necessarily good for the child. Because if it were not you, right, another teacher would just ignore this child with the special need that the child have. Well, ignore the special need of the child. Anyway, I just offered an opinion. I don't want us to veneer too much because we don't have time to veneer.
But that's a good point, though, and that's what a lot of researchers were finding were happening to students in Belize. They were just left alone, or they were encouraged not to come to school. I was surprised to hear that we went that far, because people didn't know what to do with those students. But again, it's not the teacher's fault. The system has to train these teachers to be able to provide services for these kids. Okay, coming back to the categories, another one that is misunderstood, and sometimes people just like to say, oh, emotional disturb. There's a thing called emotional disturbance.
Okay.
That is different than behaving badly or not listening. You know, some of our kids, and it starts from home. They don't follow rules. You have to repeat it over and over. Those would not be emotional disturbance. These are children that have significant behavior to where it affects learning. There are some students that, they just, it could be a chemical imbalance. It could be because they were left alone for too long with getting away with bad behavior, that it becomes who they are. And then it could endanger other students because they have those blow ups and things like that. What I want to say about emotional disturbance is that it takes a lot before a psychologist would even say a student is emotionally disturbed. But there is that category of emotional disturbance. Okay, and some of these challenges include persistent anxiety, depression, difficulty managing emotions, or behaviors that interfere with school. So that mental health stuff, these would be kids that part of their service might be counseling, right? Or what you call behavior management. They are actually taught how to behave and how to respond. And that's a whole different set of learnings there by itself. So mental health is just Percy, that's why you're on something good. Mental health is just as important as physical health. So we have to help these children become mentally healthy, which begins from home, guys. It's a home environment that you provide for your children. Children need to feel loved. Children need to feel understood. Children need to be heard. If they're not, some of those, it builds up something inside of children, and then they come to school and they want to take it out of the teachers and other students, right? So then another disability category is hearing impairment. Okay. Now this is hearing loss, not deafness, but enough hearing loss that it affects learning. Okay. Early identification and intervention. In all of these categories, early identification and intervention is important, including the student with autism. The sooner they identify the kid and the sooner they begin with interventions, the better it is for that child, before the behaviors that they're learning takes root. Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Another disability, and this is a big category, is speech and language. A lot of students, sorry, they have difficulty producing speech songs. They have difficulty understanding language. They have difficulty expressing language. So language could be spoken and expressive. So it's how you express yourself. It's how you understand language. Okay. And then some of them have difficulty fluency. Stuttering is just one simple example, but some of these kids, they have to be taught how to form, how to move their mouths to form sounds, But the sooner you start with that, the better it is. So in special education, if I were to show you a Venn diagram students with specific learning disability, and I haven't gotten there yet, and
Mhm.
students with speech would be the biggest portion of students who qualify under one of these categories. So speech and language is needed because, um, as everything else, you need to learn how to communicate. If you don't know how to communicate, and you don't know how to understand the communication that is coming at you, you have difficulty not only in learning but in life. And so,
But
again,
briefly,
yes,
um, it's treatable,
yes.
and if so, what's the best time to address it? When you're done right rolling at your age, you could still get help with this. Or
Yeah, you can, but it's a lot of, even with your mouth formation, those things now have you cement there already, man. You can't wait till it's
uh,
too old,
uh,
So again,
uh,
speech and language,
uh-huh.
they're therapists who specialize in speech and language. So that's
Okay.
all they do. Their only task is to provide speech and language therapy. We call it
Okay.
therapy. So that's another therapist.
Gotcha.
Belize don't have a lot of those. The few
Gotcha.
that we have, okay, come back to Southern Districts. The few
Uh-huh.
that we have is either in Belmopan, Belize City, and even Kyle beat us up in Southern Districts. Now,
Okay. Okay.
there's a young lady, Jada Agustin. She's a
Mhm.
speech pathologist here in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Her family is from Dangriga, and she has a passion to provide that because she's a speech and language pathologist.
Uh-huh.
And so she's gone to Belize. As a matter of fact, last year, they
Uh-huh.
had a 1 week program at Holy Ghost
Uh-huh.
where they encourage students who need speech and language, well, students with special needs, but especially the ones who need speech and language services,
Uh-huh.
so that and they brought students with them to teach these kids not only strategies but teach the teachers strategies that they could use in their classroom, and then
Okay.
teach the parents some strategies that they as parents, because parents also have a role to play in helping their child learn to speak.
Of course.
Even though, hey, but I'll tell you something about us, as I will talk about our people as Gary Nogo. Sometimes we don't talk
Uh-huh.
to our children to find
Uh-huh.
out how was your day, making sure they answer you, whatever language they use. Because
Uh-huh.
growing up, I had to talk Earth, not to my pop, okay? So so it had to be, let it be complete sentences. Let the children know you're interested in other words, encourage verbal communication with those kids. But madam Tieti Waduhe, we not got time for that for
Oh.
kids, but that is a
Oh.
critical component of learning.
Okay.
So communication challenge can affect learning, it can affect
Uh-huh.
confidence, it can affect relationship. So early support makes a difference. And don't forget, Percy, even as
Uh-huh.
adults, if you don't know how to communicate, because you might just get angry because you don't know how to express yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's where sometimes problem lies with relationship, with our adult relationship.
Okay.
Mhm. So the other one is there's something called multiple disability. And these are children who have one or two or more disability occurring together. So it could be, you know, you
Hmm.
have a physical disability, which is orthopedic disability impairment, with one of the other ones that I'm talking about. You might have a
Mm-hmm.
speech impediment along with ortho, and so those will be multiple. Okay, so
Right.
yeah, the other one is orthopedic impairment. Now that's obvious because it's obvious to the eyes. This
Mm-hmm.
one includes physical disability affecting movement, such as cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, and limb differences. So um, I've seen this in Belize. As a matter of fact, there's a student that I have concern about with cerebral palsy because of the effect of the physical disability. They're kids, you see them walk limping,
Mm-hmm.
and we just take it for granted, right?
Mm.
I always think about Joan Hagabuck Better than Griga. People, and we used to tease. That's why sometimes children or parents have us, they're embarrassed because we tease them. There's a stigma related to all these things rather
Mm-hmm.
than acceptance to
Mm.
make sure that these people feel a part of our community. And that's what I would like to happen in Belize and Dangriga and Punta Gorda, the southern districts, that we take away the stigma, we take away the shame, accept the students for who they are, and still encourage them to go as far as they possibly can with their education, and then provide that support. So while I was doing the Pablo Lambe Foundation work,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Peter Arana and I were talking about a student who probably need physical therapy, like the stretching of those muscles, right? Certain
Mm-hmm.
exercises so that that kid could, you know, it doesn't grow up with more tighten and create more problem eventually, to the point that some of these children will require surgery.
Okay.
So we have to look at all of those. Like I said, cerebral palsy, muscular
Mm-hmm.
dystrophy, and some limbs, right? So some students need physical accommodation. That's why you have the wheelchair. Some students are so bad that you have to have wheelchairs. So the ramps, how are they getting around that school campus if they need wheelchair? Do we have the accommodation? That's another big
Yes.
thing we need to talk about in special ed, per se, is what are all those accommodations that those children learn in the class need, in the classroom and out of the
Well,
classroom.
well, well. On that, briefly, as you sojourn through the schools in the south, did you find ramp? Did you find, you know, accommodation for students with special needs in the government schools? Did you find it?
Not
Ramp
all.
paso,
No,
ramp
we don't have.
paso.
No, no.
Huh?
And
In government schools? In government schools?
well, I didn't see a lot. Let's put it that way, because sometimes, it's the rules of the country that make schools then have to build those things, right?
Yeah,
Left
but
alone,
it the anger me, man. But go ahead though.
because I see stairs. So in other words, if a student who have physical orthopedic impairment, will their classrooms be on the first level and then not have access to second? Are we considering
Okay.
where those classrooms are? So
Okay.
those are things that school site administrators and teachers should be talking about when these kids
Okay.
come along. How are we accommodating these children to, number one, maybe not spread out their classroom too far because movement is difficult for them, and making sure that they don't have to climb those stairs, because we're not an elevator
Yes.
here in the States. At the school where I was, certain children were given the keys to elevators so that they could move up and down levels, but we don't have that in Belize, and we're far from that. But we can still consider what would be the most appropriate sets of classrooms for those children.
Right. Right.
Now, I have to say that physical disability does not determine intelligence. Some people might look at a child in a wheelchair and feel like, oh, he can't learn. That might be the brightest child. Has his physical being has nothing to do with his intelligence. That might be the smartest kid in that classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to be careful about our biases and
Right.
the
Right.
way
Right. The
how we
stigma.
the stigma and our perception, because we ready to
Mm-hmm.
write off children. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
there's a thing called another category, Percy, called
Mm-hmm.
other health impaired. It's OHI,
Okay.
and these are these it deals with
Mm-hmm.
health condition that affects strength, alertness, and attention, such as ADHD. And I think somebody had emailed me about ADHD, attention deficit hyper disorder. There's epilepsy,
Mm-hmm.
diabetes, sickle cell disease, heart condition. Those are
Mm-hmm.
all health problems that could be
Mm-hmm.
happening to that child in your classroom.
Okay.
And so what do you do with that? So any medical condition that affect learning and school
Mm-hmm.
participation, then
Wow.
and sometimes they're not visible. So
Mm-hmm.
I've had
Mm-hmm.
students, well, not in my classroom, but when I, as a high school administrator, that were diabetic, that needed their medication at school, that we
Uh-huh.
need a nurse to make sure that, to give them their medication. So these medication would have to stay in a health office, right? We don't have that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing yet in Belize. So I don't even know. And that's another thing I could look into. How do we deal with children with health impairment within our system? I didn't take a laser look at that. In the States, we develop what we call the health action plan for these students. So along with, we don't leave it to chance to take
Yeah,
care of these children.
yeah, yes, but uh, in the States, and we're not trying to compare. I'm
Uh-huh.
just trying to look at what the universal, or what we say is the ceiling is. In the
Mhm.
States, they have special education schools, right?
Yes, they do.
Uh-huh. So that's the paramount recommendation, that you put this child at the most suited school, right? Rather than
Okay.
a public school, requiring the public school to make the necessary adjustments, right?
Okay,
Is
so
not
Percy, no.
uh,
So let me tell you. So there are two things, right? We have identification. So we need to identify one of these categories. Has nothing to do with placement. So the other job is, okay, now that we know all these things about the kids, what's the best placement option, right? And so you have to talk about options. That's another area that we need to talk about in Belize, because let me tell you, here in the States, some of the placement options would be the first, and this has to do with LRE, least restrictive environment. The least
really.
restrictive environment for that child is that general ed classroom. Every child belongs to a general education classroom. That's the
Oh,
first that's the first placement option.
ah,
Given all the support and material that they need. In other words, and I had a picture that I was going to pull up for you, Percy.
ah,
If I need
ah,
one, two, three things, that get me those one, two, three things that I need in that classroom. Not move me because you don't have the one, two, three things that I need. Find it, give it to me in that classroom so I can compete with my normal peers and get to where I need to get to.
I got you. I got you. I got
Uh-huh.
you.
So that's another one. So another placement option in the States is what they would call a resource classroom or resource services. So what does that look like? That's one step away from a general ed classroom. At the elementary level, and I'll just use the models that I'm familiar with in the States,
Ah,
these kids they might be a little bit behind, let's say, in reading and math, but
mhm,
they go to a specialist, a special education teacher in a smaller classroom, and they get direct instruction in reading and math
uh-huh.
during the day, and then they're sent back to their general ed classroom.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Then they have another one called an SDC classroom. Now, these are kids that are pulled out, still a part of the general school, but they're in a smaller classroom and they're being
Mhm.
taught slower with maybe less problem. You might do 20, but I might do 10, Percy.
Okay.
But my
Uh-huh.
10 also show that I
Mhm.
have the knowledge that you have. You don't have to give me 20 just to keep me busy.
Uh-huh. Got
So
you.
that's, yeah. But not all kids belong in a general ed classroom, but the leeriness that parents have is that sometimes we go to the extreme. Oh, they got special ed, they need to go to that school. Holy Ghost has a special ed um, program. And
Okay.
I've heard teachers say, oh, all their kids belong to Holy Ghost. No, they don't. A lot of these kids will do fine in those general ed classrooms. That's where inclusion comes in. And I'm a
Okay.
proponent of full inclusion until
Okay.
when we exhaust all the things that I'm talking about, before we say, okay, we have to look at another placement option for these kids. But that's another need in Belize. We don't have all these options.
Uh-huh.
And so it's on the teacher in the classroom, and that's why some teachers are getting frustrated with this whole special education thing,
Yeah.
because there's some missing pieces. So my
Okay.
encouragement to the teachers would be, then become advocates of the various placement options that are possible.
Yeah.
Again, that's a cost, Percy,
I
because
know.
you need one other teacher now to do certain things.
I know. But let me just say that you have so far covered um, the category autism spectrum disorder, ASD, right? That's the
Mhm,
first one you did. You
mhm,
did deaf and blindness.
mhm.
You did deafness, which is separate and apart from.
Yes.
You did emotional disturbance.
Mhm,
You've covered hearing impairment,
mhm,
speech or language impairment.
mhm,
You've covered multiple disability,
mhm,
orthopedic impairment.
mhm.
You just did other health impairment.
Yes.
You have about three more to go.
Percy, you're a good student, because even when you introduced me to that, I said, hey, you remember all of that? So you're paying attention, Percy. I think you sit down in the front of the class.
I did take
Yeah.
notes. I did cheat, man. I did take notes.
Yeah, you did take notes. You did take notes. Mhm. So
uh,
Percy, there's one that is intellectual disability. Oh my
uh,
gosh. Um, Now, these are the kids that I would say, if you were to say certain kids don't belong in the general ed classroom, at least for the content area. And I need to
yes.
quantify that, because
Yes.
the one thing we don't want to do with special education students is to also isolate them, so
Mhm.
that they never interact with their what so-called general education
Peers.
peers, right? Because you could
Uh-huh.
find a time during the day where these kids, regardless of their intelligence,
Mhm.
interact with their peers. These are children with an intellectual disability,
Mhm.
learn at a slower pace, and that's not the same as slow learners. Slow learners is not a part. Some kids are just slow learners. That has nothing to do with special education. They just learn slow,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Correct.
So they have problem with reasoning, problem solving, and daily living,
Mhm.
but they can learn to develop at their own pace. Now, these are, and I know you've seen some of these kids that they know I learn algebra, they know I
Mhm.
learn how to write a 6 paragraph essay, they know I
Mhm.
learn any scientific now, but you could teach them their names, their
Mhm.
addresses, who their parents are, how to
Mhm.
make change up to $1, how to move around in society.
Mhm.
We even have programs like that for students, and we also find jobs for these students, because they think this is about dignity of life, regardless of your intelligence, right? 'Cause
Yes, 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 yes.
a lot of these kids could put clothes on a hanger, because that's a
Yes.
repetitive task, and it doesn't require
Yes.
too much knowledge. Because we have big stores here that would hire those kids, and all their job is to put the clothes on the hanger, because then somebody else going to put them on display in the
Mhm.
store.
Mhm.
Um, in grocery stores, these kids might be the one to unpack the canned goods out of the box.
Right.
So even in Belize, one of the
Mhm.
things I wanted to do when I have the time is look at the business owners to see what can these kind of children, rather than they're walking around, there's no hope, they don't have no source of income. What
Mhm.
can businesses do to hire these kids? What is repetitive in your store that does not require a master's degree or a
Gotcha.
bachelor's degree to do.
Mhm.
You could teach these kids these repetitive duties that could still earn them a 5 cents.
Yes, ma'am. Agreed.
Mhm. So those are the kids with intellectual disability. That's a
Mhm.
small group to Percy. Thank goodness
Okay.
that's a small
Indeed.
group.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
But you could look around Belize and see, oh, that must be a special ed student that was never served. You could see them bent down, looking like they're begging, that kind of stuff. We have to begin to wonder, if we have an inclusive community, we don't want to leave anyone behind. Even those people should be a concern to us, to uno smart people. You and Ivan need to uno smart, but uno have to worry about them people too. Like, what did we miss? With this one. Now, so that's another category, Percy, intellectual disability. Are you taking notes?
Yes,
Another one is specific learning disability, SLD.
okay.
Now,
Okay.
this is the biggest category of students with disability. They have difficulty in one or more academic area, usually in reading and writing or math. Now, the difficulty is not so significant. It doesn't mean they can't learn it. It simply means they learn at a slower pace. Oh, sorry, Percy, that's my
It's
dog.
okay. Go ahead. We hear
Yeah.
you.
Okay. So you have the people with dyslexia. You hear a lot of people with dyslexia, dysgraphia. There are people who will, even adults will tell you, I still confuse me B and me D. Okay, it's not the end of the world. Find a
Right.
way to accommodate that and move on. Right? They have people who this math, like some people will never learn multiplication and division. Well, give those people a calculator, because a
Yes.
calculator can become an accommodation, so that because if they could learn the formula, I am so sorry. Hey, Mia, stop.
Go ahead. We hear you though.
Yeah, okay, an accommodation. You give them what they need to overcome whatever it is that's making them not access that curriculum. So they have average to above average intelligence, but there's a gap in their learning that the educator has to close. That's specific learning disability. A lot of those kids are sitting in a general education classroom and they're not identified, and nobody's working with them, and nobody's making sure that that they fill their gap. Having a specific learning disability does not mean that the child is not intelligent. That's an intelligent child just waiting for the teacher to unlock that intelligence. Now, from my experience, like I said, I was lucky with the participants that I have. When I tell you, these teachers, they Google stuff, they read about stuff, and some of them are learning about disability from their own experience. They're beginning to have kids with these disabilities in their families, and it forces them to find the knowledge for themselves. And the ones that are teachers are even more compassionate with those kids to keep them in those general ed classroom, because they themselves want their kids in general ed classroom. So behaviors and attitudes of teachers are changing because of personal experience or family experience. Okay, that's a specific. Yes, Percy.
Developmental delay. That one. That category.
So develop. Well, let me go to traumatic brain injury, because
traumatic. Boy, that's some serious.
Yeah. You know what, Percy? Any one of us could have what they call it TBI, because accidents happen all the time. You could be good, well functioning, getting straight A's. You go swimming or you go fishing. There's an accident and bam, it affects your brain, right? So this is when external forces such as fall, vehicle accident, sports injury, could affect your memory, your attention, your thinking, your behavior, or your physical ability. Yes. And then the 13th is visual impairment, which also include, now there's visual impairment is a little bit.
Wait. No, this language, traumatic brain injury. Okay. Does it have to be permanent?
No.
The condition.
again, that's why some kids go through all those different therapies, physical therapy.
Uh-huh.
But some of them some of them you lose.
Okay.
Think about anybody that you've heard of in Belize that have a sport injury that were able
Okay.
to move around and suddenly they can't.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, so think about those people. It happened in schools too. It happened in schools here in the
Well,
States, especially because, especially at high school, sports is a part of our living, right?
yes, yes, but the brain and the center
Right,
for the rest of the body, right? So
right.
if that one not the function 100, then
Mhm.
the messages you may be sending, or you may be sending
No message.
no message or wrong message.
Right, right. And
Okay.
it depends on the
Okay.
severity of the
Okay.
injury, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It
Okay.
depends
Okay. Mhm.
on the severity of the injury. So
Only
and
one more.
support could change. The other one is visual impairment, which again include blindness. It ranges from low vision to complete blindness. Children may use Braille. So you'll hear more and more about Braille, and I'll tell you a little bit about that because we do have Braille Institute, and somebody wondered if Belize offer Braille, and the answer
Uh,
is yes because I researched it, and there's a hospital that
okay.
because I did a training for the junior college in June,
Mhm.
and one of the teachers from St. John's College asked, there's a student with with blindness in their classroom who is in their general ed math, and one of the accommodation would be
Mhm.
then get in touch with the Braille Institute in Belize,
Mhm.
see what they can. Again, we don't know if the student know Braille or not, but
Mhm.
those people will definitely help you to address some concerns with visual impairment. So Belize have all of that, but we're not. I don't know. I don't think it's common knowledge because a lot of teachers are not even aware that sometimes you have to be proactive that you build your own bridges because of the services you want for your students.
Well.
I would be that kind of teacher for say, okay, my student need to access
Mhm.
this thing. You could use large print, but large print now I help
Yeah.
somebody who 99% blind. But if they
Yeah.
just have bad vision like me and you and Ivan who need glasses, maybe large
Mhm.
print is gonna help us, right? And so do we have the ability to increase the font of maybe of our notes to our kids?
Mhm.
There's a thing called assistive technology. We have people in the States, their biggest job is to find a piece of technology that would help that kid with certain
Okay.
problems. So assistive technology is a huge part of the services for students with special needs.
Mhm.
And then also mobility training. So
Okay.
if you have a child who has a visual impairment in your classroom, you as a
Uh-huh.
teacher will need to figure out the degree because
Uh-huh.
maybe just increasing the font is big enough for those kids. Sometimes you need to use text to speech or speech to text where
Okay.
they can't see it, but they could hear it. So you put your lessons
Okay.
where they could, there's a lot of accommodation. That's a whole different topic by itself.
I know. We not got time up there. We not got time
Yeah.
at all.
So that's
No,
about it.
no, no, no. No. We have.
Mhm.
You're sure address this thing
Okay,
here with
let me look.
developmental delay? Where that one? I just
That
want to know. I just
that
want
is
to know.
also the intellectual disability. That's
Oh.
the intellectual disability, the
Oh, where is
developmental
delay?
delay.
Delay? Can you mean there? You get it, but you get it later. Where that?
Okay, you know what? Part of what we need to do as educators is just do a little bit of brain understanding of the brain, right? Because all these processes happen in the brain. So what happened on the left side of your brain and what happened on the right side of your brain and how these synapses work. Well, some kids the bulb not go on, it just not it not come on. So you have to
Okay,
find
okay,
other ways, and yeah, it's just the reality, and
okay, okay.
unfortunately, That's how they were born. And like I said, our job as educators, both general education teachers, special education teachers, and all service providers, because there's a lot of service that could come into the school, but Belize, we're not there yet with all the services.
Okay.
I will send you I will send you a graph with the different services that could be associated with students with special needs. It's to bring that child to the fullest of his or her ability so that they could have a dignified life. And you'd be surprised. I've heard stories when I did my research. I think there was a young boy. I don't know if he was deaf or what, but you know what? He has a stall right there by Methodist. The man know how to
Okay.
hustle and do life,
Ah.
right? So you hear stories like that. So
Okay.
is that because the parent help him along and let him accept who he is and not be ashamed of it, but he figure out life. He must have more money than me and you, Percy, because with
That's
that
streetwise, huh?
style way he have, you know what I mean? There's all you
Ah.
could feed yourself, teach, all of us need
Okay.
to be doing gardening and growing our own
Really, I
healthy
agree with that.
food, right? So whether you have a disability or a degree, there's certain things that we could make life easier for ourselves. So
Ah.
we have to look at uh this whole enchilada called education and
Ah.
determine what does it mean to be educated, honestly.
Okay. Well, we are asking co-host for give me a brief closing. Closing.
Well,
Answer the question.
I will be very brief because I think, Doc, I think we should start with this physical accommodation. No, I think we
Mhm.
should believe there are certain little things that we maybe do to make learning better for students. So, and it wouldn't take much. All we need to do is to find assistance. Maybe you and I, or we can also help the teachers. For
Okay.
example, ramp, a simple ramp to get up, because most of the schools are elevated. Um, and so I'm very, very enlightened and impressed with your presentation on all the areas because I think it's so relevant in Belize. And I wish you all the best in what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Like I said, I will continue giving in terms of knowledge and being. I told you guys about Jada Agustin because she and I spoke. She's already planning another one of those trainings in Dangriga for next year. She'll bring students, and she also bring occupational therapists, physical therapists, people who specialize, speech
Oh,
and language pathologists, and so I want to bring her on this show one of these days to talk about what she does, Percy. But 6 o'clock your time, that 4 o'clock that California, we got to change
California.
our time.
Ah.
Yeah, we have
Yes.
to change
Okay.
our time.
Well, okay. Whenever you can arrange it, we will flex with that.
Okay, yeah.
Is she how you address her? Dr. Augustine or how you go?
She's working on her PhD, so
All
she's
right.
not there yet, but she's on her way. Yes.
All right. Well,
Mhm.
whenever you are ready, that's what we'll do. We'll flex the time and then we'll go from there. Any final remark?
Well, I still haven't gotten into autism, so I guess I'll have to come. I know they
No,
come,
no. How
Percy.
long
I know
have
they come back too often, Percy, because I don't want people get tired of me.
then,
So, but autism, because that again, the only thing I want people to know that it's a
uh,
spectrum, and there's so many variables to this thing called autism. Okay, but
uh,
a lot of students need help with communication and social interaction.
yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
like how you really say you emphasize that our spectrum, right?
Mhm. Yes.
And yes, they say no two people are exactly alike, right?
Right.
There's a variance, right, from one person to the other. So, but also um, you emphasize that there's a team approach, a team of
Yes.
experts approach to determining, right, who is
Right.
who, and
Yes.
which category the patient or the student may be faced with.
Yes.
So I'm glad that here's hoping and praying, right, that notwithstanding they're not first world like the United States, that we start moving in the direction, but not only teachers. I know you largely address them today, but parents also need to do their part, um, because it has to be um, a stakeholder approach.
Yes.
Am I wrong?
You're right. And we also have to do parent training. That's something that I like when we work with Jada. The student participate in a week camp,
Okay.
but then we tie parents training to that too, because we need to bring our parents along. Percy, Meredith
Uh-huh.
Kelly said that you are a smart student at school.
I never want that up there, but that's not what we wanted up there.
No,
Well, what we
no,
wanted.
that's good.
But thank you so much, Doc. And so we will expect some more in the series, and then to hear from Miss Augustine working on a PhD. We will bring her on the set. Much
Okay.
obliged, and it's been a good one. I really enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you, buddy. Have a good one. See you guys. Hang
Uh-huh.
in there, family and friends with students with special needs. We'll get this. We'll figure it out together.
Are you?
Ayo.